Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 195. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, what a difference 48 hours makes. It was pretty quiet on the Monday show, didn't have much to discuss, and we have an abundance of things to talk about today. For those who missed it, Dave and I had an emergency podcast Tuesday afternoon, evening to react to the Nick Herbig contract extension news. We'll, of course, go over some of the highlights and overall thoughts of that deal. Today, Myles Garrett is out of the AFC North, so happy dances all around for Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and even head coach Mike McCarthy was pleased as punch to hear that news. So rookie or mandatory minicamp underway. Today is the last day. They'll have their Kennywood Day tomorrow. So a ton going on here. Dave, how you doing?
All right. Happy Wednesday. We've had a busy couple of days, have we not? We had a Monday podcast. We had a Monday night live stream. We had the Nick Herbig news yesterday, and then we had a 30-minute emergency podcast, and now we're back at it on a Wednesday morning here. So, it was probably good that we got that Nick Herbig, the bulk of that talked about on Tuesday evening there. We'll talk a little bit more about it today. I think Alex Highsmith is the big discussion point going on, it seems, in the Steelerverse this morning. We'll talk a little bit about that. And Darnell Savage is finally officially a Steeler now after all this time. And yes, it is officially official. I saw it on the NFL transaction sheet yesterday afternoon. So that is officially official. So I don't know if you want to start there or not. But we've got interesting group of players that they brought in for tryouts on Tuesday as well too. So we'll discuss a little bit about that. Yeah, Myles Garrett out of not only out of the AFC North, but out of the AFC as a whole. And I don't know, there's some Aaron Donald speculation going on at the same time on top of it. So dealer's choice here.
Well, let's start with Darnell Savage, because that is a move 3 months in the making. And with the Herbig conversation, there's a lot of offshoots to that we'll discuss. So Savage officially signing. It was first reported back in March that he had agreed to a deal with Pittsburgh. It was never officially signed. Not sure, still unsure of the reasons why. I assume something medical and health related, but he signed and was on the field wearing number 31 for mandatory minicamp yesterday in a corresponding move. Pittsburgh releasing safety/cornerback Makari Page, who would sign in mid-May after Corey Trice Jr. was waived with his failed physical designation. So Savage will be competing for depth with Robert Spears-Jennings, the rookie, second-year player Sebastian Castro. Pittsburgh will keep at least 4 safeties, possibly even 5, and so we'll see how the pieces fit behind Jalen Ramsey, who of course will play corner and safety, Deshaun Elliott, back healthy, and Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah, never hurts to have too much depth, and especially cheap, experienced depth as well. So we have talked about Savage. Feels like we have talked about him for like 3 months now at this point. So it is officially official at this point, and he's got a pretty tough road ahead of him, it feels like, when it comes to making this roster. But once again, you can never have enough experienced cheap players, and he obviously has pedigree as what was he, former first round pick, right? Was it with Savage?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Feels like a decade ago now, but I know it hasn't been that long ago. But anyway, yeah, that's a starting point there. And out the door went.
Like I said, Makari Page was waived in a corresponding move, so he spent less than 1 month on the roster.
Yeah, we barely got to know him, but I think the roster now is at 91 active players with 1 on the IR, so should be 92 players under contract at this point.
And Savage was the 21st overall pick of the 2019 NFL Draft. Pittsburgh did show interest in him coming out of Maryland. We did the film study on him way back when we thought the signing was going to happen in March. And frankly, looks like a guy who's pretty much near the end of his NFL career. Bounced around 3 teams last year, the Jags, Commanders, and finished up in Buffalo. Got torched for a long touchdown in the divisional game against Denver. And so this is depth, special teams help, a veteran guy to compete with youngsters like Castro, like Spears Jennings, but nothing assured. It's a 1-year contract. We don't know details, but I'm sure it's for the minimum, if not very close to it.
Yeah, it probably will end up being a veteran benefit contract, I would think, with him, but we'll have to wait a couple of days for the NFLPA to update that. I still have not seen the Lowry contract hit yet, so I know they're still a little bit behind there. I don't think, once again, I think with Lowry, it's going to be a veteran benefit contract, likely no signing bonus as well. So we'll wait for the final details of that as they wind down their mandatory minicamp week.
I almost called you Pittsburgh for a second. I was going to say Dave, and then I was going to say Pittsburgh, and ended up kind of saying nothing. Pittsburgh
That's
brought
better
in,
than what my wife calls me, but
you've been called worse before, I'm sure. Dave, the Steelers brought in 5 players for tryouts during mandatory minicamp, which feels like something new under Mike McCarthy. I don't believe this happened under Mike Tomlin. It is permissible, though, to bring some of these guys in for a tryout similar to rookie minicamp. And a couple of notable names here. Former Green Bay Packers tight end Robert Tonyan was brought in. He had a really big season with Aaron Rodgers several years ago, and so potential for Pittsburgh to add some tight end depth. And then former first-round pick of Washington, Jamin Davis, who was an athletic freak linebacker out of Kentucky, never really stuck. He was also brought in. A couple other names brought in as one of the punter. Pittsburgh still has just the one punter on the roster, James Platt. Wide receiver Trayvon Rudolph, and inside linebacker Amari Burney also trying out, maybe give Pittsburgh depth at those positions.
Yeah, we'll have to see if any of these result in signings. Obviously, I don't know what the rules are. And at this time of the offseason too, the transaction sheet, I don't believe they have to report tryouts on that. There probably is a larger sheet maybe that showed up on, but not one that I have access to. But Robert Tonyan and Jamin Davis obviously are the 2 really big highlighted names on that. And Tonyan, it goes without, we've mentioned Tonyan, I think, once or twice throughout the offseason about a potential guy, and it's easy to draw the connect the dots there from his time in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is in the past has talked very highly of Tonyan, and Tonyan had at least one very good season, I think, as a member of the Packers back when Aaron Rodgers played for him. Obviously, Mike McCarthy knows him well. You could do worse for adding a tight end on your depth chart on the cheap, assuming Tonyan is healthy and has a little gas left in the tank. So if the fact that they brought him in at least for a tryout shows some level of interest there. And now we'll wait and see if he did enough to warrant getting signed. And then Jamin Davis, obviously the other kind of highlighted name of the 5 guys that they brought in for a tryout. Man, what an athletic freak he was coming out of Kentucky, right? Did they bring, I forgot to look, was he a guy that they brought in for a pre-draft visit a few years ago or no?
I'm not sure. That sort of rings a bell that they had interest in him, sort of like Bud Dupree, those Kentucky freaky linebackers, but I'm trying to effort and check now if they did show interest in him whenever Jamin Davis came out of the draft. I'm not seeing anything immediate, but I couldn't tell you definitively one way or another.
All right, I couldn't remember whether or not, I mean, he's a name that I know we did spend a lot of time on probably the year that he was drafted. Former first round pick, from a measurable standpoint, obviously athletic trait, spark or RAS. I mean, he really stuck out, but unfortunately hasn't lived up to his draft pedigree from several years ago. So once again, we'll have to wait and see if this is a guy that the Steelers love the pedigree type players during the offseason on the cheap. We just saw that with Darnell Savage. Could they use another inside linebacker in the room? I guess it wouldn't hurt, but we'll just have to wait and see with Tonyan and Davis whether or not those guys get signed as mandatory minicamp winds down. It is good to see this team bring in another punter in James Platt. We'll see if anything happens there. Is your bet that this team at least opens up training camp with two punters? And we've been talking a little bit about it for most of the offseason, but yet here we are with Cameron Johnston still the only one under contract. Do you think they're looking for the right guy? And thus, when we get to the start of training camp, they'll have a second one? Or, is this more building up the Rolodex?
I believe they'll have a second punter before training camp, especially, in preseason action. You don't want to potentially tax a punter for the entire slate there. And Johnston has not had to do a lot of punting because of injury, unfortunately, for him the last couple of years, but still a relatively older guy. So my expectation is a second punter will be brought in. Most teams, much if any team, just has one punter in training camp of the preseason process. So that's my belief, but I think Pittsburgh is trying to find that right guy and is in no hurry to do so, given that OTAs and spring workouts are less taxing.
All right, and I guess we should highlight the fact that both Jamin Davis and Amari Burney, the two inside linebackers brought in for tryouts, have familiarity with Patrick Graham during his time with the Raiders, correct?
Yes, that's a good point. I didn't even make that connection yet. Davis was with the Raiders last season, played in just 2 games, but was there for a brief time. And then Bernie's connection, he was there in 2023 and 2024. So good point by you.
All right, I don't know much about Rudolph, the wide receiver that they brought in.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of information either. I forget what's in the post and I clicked out of it. But if he gets signed, we'll, of course, talk about him if he stands out. Really just 2 days to prove themselves because Thursday is that team bonding day. Speaking of special teams, just really briefly, while you mentioned it, it jogged my memory. Mike McCarthy speaking to reporters before Tuesday's practice and confirmed the removal and departure and firing of special teams assistant Darius Swinton II that happened last week. And McCarthy, more importantly, confirming the team is undergoing the process of hiring a second special teams coach in Swinton's replacement, and McCarthy promising that a new coach will get hired sometime here in the future. So that was kind of my belief. They would hire a replacement. Who that'll be, it's impossible to predict, but they're going to add a coach probably before training camp.
Yeah, and that was good on you, noting that you kind of thought they'd go down that road, at least fill the position at some point. So now we'll wait to see exactly who that winds up being because of McCarthy's history, right, with liking to have assistant coordinators.
Yeah, in most teams, Pittsburgh was that rare exception to just have Danny Smith and the one entitled special teams coordinator. Smith got some help from other assistant coaches, but most teams, including McCarthy's Cowboys teams, always had 2. And so that's the way the league has gone. As coaching staffs, our annual study, coaching staffs have increased year over year, and they'll hire somebody, and we'll let you know who and when that person is. All right, Dave, before the Nick Herbig news came out Tuesday, we would have opened up the Wednesday show with the big news, even though it's not directly about Pittsburgh. It certainly impacts Pittsburgh in a big way. Myles Garrett, a Cleveland Brown, no more. Monday, a very busy trade day for the NFL. A.J. Brown going from the Eagles to the Patriots, and so Pittsburgh will see him earlier this season in week 2. But the big news is Myles Garrett dealt from Cleveland to the L.A. Rams. Browns getting back Jared Verse and future draft picks, a first-round pick in 2027, and then second and third-round picks in drafts after that. And so the bad man is out of the AFC North. I think it's a cause of celebration versus a very good player. No question about that. I understand Cleveland's calculation, but to not have to face Garrett and the game record that he is, again, is a big win for Pittsburgh.
And then we get the Rams once again pretty much saying F them picks, right? When it comes to that, you definitely can understand, I believe, both sides of this deal. And we talked the other day about the buzz picking up about Myles Garrett on the Monday show, especially now that June 1st has passed, and especially the way they adjusted his contract this past off season. It's interesting to hear kind of Barry, for the GM for Cleveland, talk about how all that that came together and yada, yada. We didn't intend on trading. You never intend on trading a player until you actually trade them. We hear it time and time again. Well, we're going to make him a one helmet guy. Everything has a price, right? And I think overall, this is a good deal for both teams from the standpoint, at least on Cleveland's side of things. You get the draft capital that you got, and that obviously includes a first-round draft pick next year, and a lot will be made of that, I'm sure, moving forward, especially when it comes to how this quarterback class of 2026 ends up for 2027 ends up playing out. Myles Garrett wasn't going to win a championship in Cleveland this year with all the stuff about Jim Schwartz out the door and the head coach. I'm not shocked. Now, do I think Myles Garrett went to this team and said, trade me? I don't know about that overall.
The reporting says no, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, for whatever that's worth. But I don't think he had. I don't think he had to twist his arms to get those bags packed to go over there to the Rams, who obviously have a now a better than average chance of not only winning, competing against the Seahawks for that division, but several are going to put them up even higher now. I think in the rankings of being Super Bowl favorites for this coming year. And once again, I understand why the Rams did it. And look, Verse is a guy that will seemingly get lost a little bit in the conversation of this trade. He is a fine player. He's a young developing player. He's a player that's still got time left on his contract and still an ascending player in this league. But with giving him the respect that he's due at this point in his game, he is not Myles Garrett, and the fact now that the Steelers won't have to face Myles Garrett twice a year is obviously significant. And look, once again, I'm not going to take anything away from Verse. There he is, a quality pass rusher, but the Steelers getting out from underneath of having to play Myles Garrett twice a year is a huge, huge deal, at least on the surface here. So, and not only that, he's out of the AFC in the entirety. The Steelers won't have to face Myles Garrett in 2026 unless they go to the Super Bowl, and that'll be a good problem to potentially have should that end up manifesting. And as you mentioned, Mike McCarthy was all for it. Myles Garrett being traded away from Cleveland, so it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward for Cleveland, who they're on a constant rebuild, it seems, and they're having to figure out the whole quarterback position still. And once again, Myles Garrett wasn't going to win a Super Bowl, I don't think, this year with Cleveland, and now he's got the opportunity to do so with the Rams. But it does make sense for both teams here to do what they did.
I think Daniel Jeremiah put it well that it fits both teams' timelines. The Rams' short-term play of let's go win now and find a move that'll put us over the top. And Garrett's one of those guys that certainly is a force multiplier and can really put you over the top. And I think someone made the comparison that the Rams have two really good closers. It might have even been Jeremiah that said it. The Stafford offensively, his ability to win games late, and Garrett, his ability to win games late if the Rams are ahead narrowly. And then Cleveland, of course, just a team that's not close and is going to need to make some difficult moves to try to get over the hump and turn this franchise around. So for Pittsburgh's purposes, though, versus a talented player, and he could certainly have splash plays against the Steelers. He's a power rusher, a growing, ascending player, 7.5 sacks last year, defensive rookie of the year in 2024. Don't want to slight him, but he is not Myles Garrett. And it wasn't just about Garrett himself. It was that every offense, Pittsburgh's included, had to revolve their game plan around stopping Garrett, which meant putting fewer guys out in the pattern, which meant you can't run play action when he's on the field, which meant drawing all your attention to him. We saw that last year in Week 17 in the upset win that Cleveland had, and people say that was for the sack record. It wasn't for the sack record. Pittsburgh does that every game against Myles Garrett to minimize him, and he still averaged about 1 sack per game against the Steelers in his career. So that really opens up your offense in so many different ways to no longer have to really build an entire offensive game plan around stopping just Myles Garrett and not letting him take over the game.
And I think you pointed out the other night on the live stream, what does this do for potentially Pat Freiermuth and his usage, particularly in games against Cleveland?
Yeah, I'm just, I didn't look at the numbers at the time. You would look into them a little bit more during the live stream. That I assume the tight end production will increase against Cleveland because the tight ends aren't chipping and blocking and releasing to stop Garrett as often. I think Freiermuth has had some okay numbers against Cleveland historically, but nothing the way that he's had against the Bengals or probably other teams. So middle of the field becomes more open. You just put more guys out in the pattern. So it's just a whole lot easier as an offense to build out your scheme when you're not worried about just taking care of one guy.
All right, and hopefully now we're not getting bit in the butt by some of the words that we've had to say about Jared Verse. But once again, he's a fine pass rusher, but not the game record that Myles Garrett has been the last several years, obviously.
And I know some spun the Garrett story into TJ Watt and should Pittsburgh trade him and did they error by not trading him previously, and we could talk about all that spilt milk, and I guess it's part of it's now kind of reignited the conversation with the Herbig deal. I would just say that Pittsburgh and Cleveland have been in two different worlds, two different timelines. Cleveland, third, fourth place team. They can't win more than 5 games a season. Pittsburgh more competitive. Granted, a team that has been unable to get over the hump. I understand that they are not true Super Bowl contenders, but I think if Cleveland was in Pittsburgh's shoes of a team that was always in the playoff race, they're probably not trading Myles Garrett. So I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland situations, timelines are different, which makes the Watt-Garrett conversation not quite apples to apples.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I think at this point, to think, look, I mean, there's a lot of conversation going on as a byproduct of this Herbig extension at this point. A lot of people wondering, does this mean, I think even Trey Essex came out and said somebody's getting traded, and I think Ray Fittipaldo was on the radio this morning speculating and kind of predicting. I think his overall prediction is that all 3 of those guys won't be in Pittsburgh come week 1 of the season. Now, look, obviously Nick Herbig will be at this point, and a lot of the talk seems to have shifted now to Watt potentially being traded or Herbig. I let's take this. Do you have any preamble first before we get into this and take maybe both these guys out of the box, talking about Watt and Highsmith and the potential of each getting traded?
I mean, my thoughts, and I shared them briefly on yesterday's emergency podcast, is I'm not expecting them to be traded this offseason. I don't want to say there's a 0% chance for either because I understand the rationale, and there is the big picture question of how you get all these guys on the field, Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig, and justify the big contracts they have. But I think Pittsburgh still wants to win now. I think it's reflective of many of their offseason moves and the hiring of Mike McCarthy, and they really prioritize to edge depth and having great talent there and being really strong with that front 7. So I think it's more of a reevaluation after the season and kind of go from there. I'm not going to completely close the door on a trade now, but that's not my expectation or belief of where Pittsburgh wants to go.
All right, let's look at Watt. Let's talk about Watt first.
Okay.
Is there any is there any thought in your head about the Steelers potentially getting a first-round pick for Watt?
You never know what a team's willing to pay, and a team that's trading for Watt is a team that is, I'm sure, in a Super Bowl window, sort of like the Rams, that would be willing to pay, a higher price to try to get them over the top. But I think we had talked about it on the Monday live stream. Somebody had asked us what we thought Watt's value was. We've talked about this before. I think he'd probably fetch a 2nd-round pick, maybe an additional later round selection. So I don't think he would command a 1st-round selection.
I do not either. All right, now next part of the conversation, let's turn to, and we're going to go a little bit deeper here. But Highsmith, at best, what do you think Highsmith would fetch on the trade market right now?
Probably something similar, a 2nd-round pick and something else, a 2nd and a 4th, 2nd and a 5th is sort of my thought. He's under contract through 2027, a little younger than TJ Watt, a smaller contract, but at their best, Watt's obviously still a a better player. So it's probably similar though.
Yeah, I would think at best a second round pick. If it's multi picks, I could probably see maybe a third and I don't know, fifth or a sixth or something like that. But as you mentioned, Highsmith still got a couple of years left on his contract, like Watt. And I mean, Highsmith, even though he has missed some games with soft tissue injuries and all, when he was on the field, particularly last year, he was a productive player as far as pressure rates, and we've seen him be able to get after the quarterback. He's a good run defender as well too. Overall, at this stage of his career, it's not like we're talking about a player in Alex Highsmith that's hit the wall or anything like that. Yeah, at best, I think you're looking at a second round pick overall for him. So that's we've addressed now what potential trade maybe compensation is, and I think we both agree at best you're going to get on the high side of any draft capital back a second round pick for either one of those guys. And then obviously we could people can theorize of what maybe a multi pick draft capital as part of a trade would be for either one of those. But we can agree at least that at best probably a second round pick for either player, right?
Sure. I think one starting point of the conversation is, will teams call Pittsburgh about TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith? I don't really think the Steelers are going to be trying to shop those guys. The Browns really weren't even trying to shop Myles Garrett. The reporting is pretty consistent. The Rams were all over Cleveland, constantly calling them, trying to work out a deal, and finally got something done. So I think it'd be other teams calling to inquire. And of course, you see Nick Herbig get this massive contract, and it creates questions for us and questions for teams too about what is the status and fate of Watt and Highsmith. And so will teams be calling? Apparently, Jeremy Fowler reporting that teams were calling about Herbig during the draft to kind of gauge potential trade interest there. Obviously, Pittsburgh unwilling, but could teams be showing interest in Watt and Highsmith?
I mean, I definitely. I mean, when you see that teams just recently, you see what happened with the Myles Garrett thing and pass rushers in the NFL, especially ones that can get the quarterback down on the ground, are a key component to building a championship team. I don't think it's totally out of the question that potentially the Steelers could get a call on one or both players at this point. Now, when you look at the Steelers side of things, before yesterday, obviously, and the Nick Herbig contract extension, people were still theorizing and looking in the rear view mirror and still wondering whether or not, especially after the Garrett deal got done as well too. I mean, we've been I don't want to say entertaining the thought, but entertaining the chatter out there, especially from the fan side of things, and some on the media side as well too, that the Steelers should potentially trade Watt or Highsmith. Now, look, prior to yesterday's news about the Herbig extension, the only thing that really has changed at this point is Herbig has an extension now. So even if Herbig had not got the extension, would this chatter have picked up the way it has, or is this just a logical byproduct of, well, you spend $100 million and Herbig now has an APY $8 million more than a guy like Highsmith? Has it picked up just from the sheer fact that we have seen Garrett traded now, and now Herbig has this $100 million deal?
Yeah, those are two good reasons for the chatter to pick up. I think that certainly, like I said, reignites the conversation.
All right. Now let's look at what the Steelers, what is in it for the Steelers to potentially trade. And let's focus more on Highsmith, because that seems to be more of where the conversation, or at least the chatter out there in the media and fan side of things, going right now. We talked the other day, as part of the Herbig conversation emergency podcast after his deal went down. And man, this team is spending a lot of cash this year, and cash is just that. You can spend as much cash really as you want to in any given season. Now, obviously, you have the constraints of the salary cap to make it all work. but this team just seems to have the appearance that we'll spend the cash that we need to spend, and we'll make it work underneath the cap. And if at this point they retain Watt-Highsmith and Nick Herbig, they can definitely make it work from a cap standpoint. And specifically, if they decide to restructure, let's say a guy like DK Metcalf here moving forward on top of it here. But Alex Highsmith as a whole, if you look at him, he's scheduled to earn $14.5 million in cash this year, and that would be the amount that you save in 2026, both in cash and cap space, if you did trade Alex Highsmith, at least when it comes to 2026. And then if you look at roster displacement, I mean, let's say displacement's like $1.5 million for a player to take his spot. You're talking about saving $13 million in both cash and cap. And in the process of trading him, yeah, you save that cash and cap space, but you also lose a pretty good player. I don't think anybody's going to be willing to compare Jack Sawyer as a one-for-one replacement for Alex Highsmith right now. So, and then on top of it, if you did trade Alex Highsmith right now, because of the other proration left on his contract, you would be pushing $5.6 million in dead money into 2027. Also, Alex Highsmith, at least in my eyes, is not a troublemaker. He's a good team player. Once again, we're not, other than the soft tissue injuries with him, when he has been on the field, last year, even on top of it, I still think he ascended some in his overall quality of his game. Obviously, has experience, and now just as a byproduct of Herbig being signed long term, it gives you options. Should either should Watt fall off the cliff in 2026, or if Highsmith himself falls off the cliff. What I'm getting at here is, where is the gain? Where, other than cash and cap of, let's say, $13 million after roster displacement, and knowing, at least thinking, that Alex Highsmith is a good quality guy, and I don't know if anybody's going to dispute that, and I wouldn't imagine Highsmith's going to be clamoring that I can't, that he's getting paid technically less than Herbig right now. What is to be gained other than a potential second round pick, at the risk of losing good experience depth at such a key position in this defense? What is to be gained by trading Alex Highsmith?
Well, I don't want to just overlook a second round selection in a 2027 draft where Pittsburgh probably wants to have draft capital where they could go fishing for a quarterback, and a second round pick may help facilitate any sort of trade up there. But it's just a math problem of, can you justify playing all three of these guys and getting good ROI on it, or not? Who's going to be odd man out? Who's going to be rotated in? Is Highsmith going to be a $17 million, average yearly value return in terms of his production when you just paid Nick Herbig? And of course, you're going to get him on the field. So I understand the overall thought of, you're paying all three of these guys. Can you really make it work and justify it? Or do you feel like you're going to get shortchanged by one of these guys? And so that would be the motivation to make a move, and the gain would be to get a pretty high draft pick for next year's draft class.
All right. Is a second round pick worth taking a key, basically hurt, there's no way around it. You're going to be hurting your depth at the position.
Yeah, that's just the ultimate question. My inclination is to say no, to not make the move now. I don't think Pittsburgh plans to do that, because they want to win now. They want to have depth, and Watt and Herbig and Highsmith have all missed time with injuries, and so it's hard to get all three on the field last year because they just someone was always down, someone was always hurt. Highsmith and Herbig early in the season, and Watt with the needling issue incident later in the year. So it just can go to those things where I think teams call and want to at least gauge and see where Pittsburgh is at.
All right, and we talked as a byproduct of the Herbig deal yesterday how you go about getting all these guys playing time, and that will be a challenge overall, especially if all three of those guys stay healthy. But I went and looked back at the raw snap count numbers of and looked specifically. Now, look, you did have. Obviously, Highsmith missed time. You had Watt missed time with the needling incident there. Highsmith with the soft tissue stuff, and even Herbig early in the season. What was that? A hamstring with him, I think. Early in the season, missed the first game, I think. Overall there, but when you look at specifically how many times they had all three of those guys on the field at one time during the regular season, I believe I came up with 37 snaps, and that's essentially half of one game defensively there. So can this team figure out a way to get these three linebackers all on the field at the same time, more than 37 snaps, at least in your head with Patrick Graham now as the defensive coordinator?
For sure, that's going to be the goal and aim, and I'm really excited and intrigued to see how Pittsburgh approaches that under this new coaching staff. But there's certainly no question that none of these guys, and you used the word depth, I know why you're using it, but none of these guys can be just depth. They have to be significant
Right.
players, impact players, provide high level of production, high level of snap count to justify their large contracts. And that's not going to be super easy to do. There's going to be a level of thought that has to get put into now achieving that. And so that's where the trade conversation comes from, because it can't just be depth. It can't just be you're a really good backup or you're rotating in and playing 20 snaps a game. It's got to be you're playing a lot and you're making a big impact.
All right. And what is the potential of one of those three guys missing at least a game or two in 2026? Although you don't want to predict injuries and all, just the nature of it and what we've seen recently, it's reasonable to expect that one, if not two of those guys is going to get dinged up at some point.
Pretty high, just based on the history of it all. None of those guys have been a beacon of health.
All right. I think the whole conversation specifically about I feel more so about Highsmith than Watt, but choose is if a second round pick is uh worth not having the player for 2026.
Yeah, I understand. And what is it sounds like your stance is keep the player instead of trading for the pick.
Now, look, if Alex Highsmith was causing problems and wasn't the guy that he was, or if TJ Watt was, clamoring to get out or whatever, it would obviously make my decision a little bit easier there. But knowing that this team can make this work from a cap standpoint, and knowing that they seem to be all in on from a cash perspective, I don't know. I don't think a second round pick is enough for me to. And look, another thing too, I'll keep saying this. I think the defense is going to really have to play consistent and better than they did last year, and not having, say, Watt or Highsmith would potentially take away from the ability of that to happen. So I would personally be inclined to not trade Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt away for a second round pick. And really, if you want to get into semantics of maybe a fifth or a sixth or whatever comes along potentially with that, I still would not be in favor of them doing so.
There's no question that Highsmith and Watt are good guys, but it's natural if Highsmith, let's just use him as the example, starts losing out on playing time. If Herbig starts starting over him, that Highsmith is not going to be a fan of that, from starter and significant player to if he loses some snaps and cedes some of that role to Herbig, especially under a new coaching staff where it's not Mike Tomlin. Those guys were tight, and a new coaching staff. You don't have maybe that banked up goodwill that you would have had the old regime remained in place. So I don't want to necessarily guarantee how those guys will react if they do start losing playing time.
Right. And look, a lot's going to be obviously being made about the differential in the APY of Highsmith and Herbig, but that Highsmith deal happened back in 2024? Is that right, with Highsmith when his
I
deal
forget.
happened?
the year? That sounds roughly
No,
maybe 23.
2023. Yeah. So you mean you've got a lot of inflation in the market on top of it at this point. Now, I suppose if Highsmith, look, the Steelers are not probably going to adjust the deal 2 years out when it comes to Highsmith at this point because he's still on the contract for 2027. I don't imagine he's going to be a guy that screams loud at this. The only way at this point, personally, and we'll obviously know by week 1 of the season. The only way I can see either one of Watt or Highsmith being traded technically in 2026 is if this team gets to the trade deadline and they're essentially out of it. Then I think the rumblings will be a lot heavier, especially if both those guys are healthy and seemingly playing well. At that point, I could potentially see one of them maybe getting traded. But personally, the trade off for a second round pick to eliminate, a very good edge rusher from this team at this point, I would not do.
I wonder what'll happen after this year. I know everyone will be a year older and another year into their contracts, which hurts value. But I think you go through this year, you see how the three-headed monster of Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig look, and who feels like odd man out. And I wonder if that will create. Obviously, Herbig won't be odd man out, but that'll maybe create motivation or a better feel for who, if anyone, gets traded. Can Watt bounce back? Does Highsmith is he productive enough to justify his contract? How does everyone feel this year went with those three guys? And so I wonder what'll happen after this year where you might make a decision there, which is kind of my thought on Herbig even before the contract. I was skeptical and admittedly wrong about Herbig getting a deal this offseason. I didn't know if it was going to happen, but I thought maybe after this season, before free agency, you might take a look at your outside linebacker room with Herbig pending free agent and try to get Herbig done then, and then maybe do something with Watt or Highsmith then. So I think that maybe a more interesting question will be after this offseason, where you can still potentially trade someone, get a pick for 2027, and have some capital that way. So that's kind of one thing I'll be looking for, assuming no trade happens before this year.
All right, and just to be clear, I think we got one reader email here saying neither Alex or Dave wanted Herbig to get extended. I don't know where they're getting that from. We both said he's a fine player, and we hope that he ends up getting extended. We weren't sure whether or not the Steelers would pay the price to warrant Herbig signing the deal. And that's why I wrote the big article about why it might be in Herbig's best interest to bet on himself in 2026 because of the kind of market value and the potential of him hitting free agency after this season, and knowing that what it would probably likely take to keep him and sign him to this extension. I wasn't totally sure whether or not the Steelers would meet that price. Now, when $25 million definitely made it worth Herbig's while to sign now, and thus not risk staying healthy and getting production just to get potentially 30 million maybe on an open market next year. So it was never about whether or not we thought Herbig should get a deal. It was whether or not we thought the Steelers would give him the deal to keep him from potentially betting on himself in 2026. And look, the timing of it too was probably more surprise, but it is what I mean. Good on them for getting it done and out of the way this early in the offseason. Now back to the conversation about Highsmith and Watt. If you were to bet which one of those would get traded, who would it be?
If I had to bet, probably Highsmith.
I would as well too. I would just think that would more than likely be the way.
But what if Watt doesn't? Okay, well the question: if Watt doesn't bounce back, then what kind of trade value does he have? Because he'll be saddled with a large contract and not great production, which just makes that naturally tough to move.
Yeah, it would be extremely tough to get in, anything premium for him after the season. If we're talking about a Watt Watt 2026 season where, I don't know, 10 sacks and missing a game or two with injuries again, and having that inflated, obviously a high cash price for one final season, and how many teams are going to go out there and trade for him, knowing that potentially just a one season guy left, especially at a high price. It would have to be a very, very unique situation where a team really had belief in Watt for 2027, and they think that would be the missing piece that could get a franchise who probably already has an established edge rusher on the other side. So it would really take a unique situation if quote unquote Watt doesn't is rebound a good word based on 2025's play, and also but I would still contend that the greater likelihood would be for Highsmith to be moved.
Sure. Because if Watt has a great season and bounces back, then you're not going to trade him based off of that. And if he struggles and the production isn't there, then it's just hard to move him, and his trade value really starts to decline. So that's my conclusion with Highsmith. The question for me, Dave, will be how will Pittsburgh get all three on the field beyond just obvious pass rush situations, what they were trying to do last year, although the group lack of health made that challenging. Are there other ways Pittsburgh could do that? They were a couple years ago doing that 3-4 over front where they would take an off-ball linebacker or an edge rusher and put him off ball and kind of do some three-outside linebacker packages that way. They did that during Highsmith's rookie year with Highsmith, Dupree, and Watt, kind of some run-oriented stuff. The 3 rush package last year was pass rushing situations. So can they find ways to get all 3 on the field more creatively? Could that come at the expense of a Peyton Wilson or even a Patrick Queen in their snap count? I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but that's going to be the charge and challenge for this coaching staff, is to find ways to get all 3, because they're 3 talented playmakers, highly paid. They need to be on the field as much as possible. That'll be the aim for the Steelers.
All right, let's say they double what they did last year. And what did I say? 37 snaps, I think, where they had all 3 on the field. Let's say they doubled that and became 74 snaps in 2026. Is that a realistic? Is that under realistic? Is it but basically you're talking one full game that you're able to, the equivalent of one full game that you're able to get all 3 out there on the field at the same time. Is that enough? Could they do it even more than that?
That comes out to just over 4 snaps per game over a 17-game season. That does not feel like enough. I don't know exactly what number that is, and it's probably a little bit circumstantial to some degree in terms of, how many pass rush situations are you in, but 74 does not feel like enough, especially if they all can be reasonably healthy.
All right, so and then you're bringing into the return on the investment, right?
Sure.
Cat,
I mean, last year the 37 number. Like, how many games were Highsmith, Watt, and healthy? Highsmith, Watt, and Herbig all healthy for? It was very few.
right?
I mean, how many can we do? Can we go through the math? It might be a little clunky to try to figure this out in real time here. Obviously, T.J. Watt would miss the nearly all the end of the season. Herbig, Highsmith early in the season. I mean, it was very few games in which they were all just even healthy for.
Well, let's see. I mean, obviously, how many games at the end of the season? Herbig, how many games was Herbig inactive for?
2.
All right, and in those same games was Highsmith or Watt ever inactive?
Well, that's what I'm trying to see right now, and PFR doesn't make it as easy to see. I know Herbig missed the season opener. I'm trying to find the other game he apparently missed, because it says he played 15 games last year. He missed week 16. Watt I'm clicking the wrong things here, so I'm not doing a great job of finding this quickly. Watt didn't come back until the regular season finale against Baltimore. Help me out here, Dave. Got anything for me?
I'm trying to pull up to see if I can find out an overlook on just inactives by week.
Okay, week 2, they were all healthy for. but Highsmith only played 10 snaps, and then he got hurt. He didn't come back until week 6. And then their group was, I think, healthy until week 11 when Highsmith went down again. And then Watt went down after week 14. And then they all were back for the regular season finale. So I don't know, rough math.
All right.
5 or 6 games.
I've got the inactive sheet pulled up for last year. 2025. What was the first game?
The Jets game.
The Jets. All right. Nick Herbig was inactive for that game. Week 2, none of the 3 were inactive. The game against New England, Highsmith was inactive. The next week against the Vikings, Highsmith was inactive. The next time any one of those guys were inactive was against the Bengals on 11/16. Alex Highsmith was inactive. Then you have Alex Highsmith also was inactive for the following game against Chicago. Watt was inactive for 3 games in a row: Miami, Detroit, and Cleveland. Nick Herbig, at only once during the season did you have 2 of those guys inactive for the same game, and that was the game against Detroit on 12/21. So in total, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games where at least one of those 3 guys was inactive. How's that?
Okay, so reverse engineering, 9 games where they were all together. But, for example, the Seattle game, Highsmith played 10 snaps, gets hurt, so he, went down early in that one. So we could basically just say half the season that they didn't have all 3 of those guys available.
All right, and what is the likelihood that you maybe come close to that? And once again,
I can't guess at that.
Yeah, but you one of these guys is likely to miss a game or 2. If not,
yeah. I mean, they're not all going to be healthy all year. To what degree of health that's hard. It's impossible to predict.
All right, so there is that side of it there, which basically rolls back into can you ever have enough good edge rushers to help with that? Now, in a perfect world, once again, where all those guys stay healthy, it will be quite the challenge to get those 3 guys on the field for more than even, let's say, 100 snaps.
Yeah, that's going to be the challenge and aim. It's a unique situation. It's a good problem for the team to have, I'm sure. They'll say to have all 3 of those guys and impact players, but they're going to have to still figure it out and make sure all those guys are productive and impactful to justify those contracts.
All right, I'll give you a 2nd and a 5th for Alex Highsmith. Are you taking it?
Like today?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just don't have a big desire to trade those guys before the season. I think after the season, my feeling might change.
All right. What about 2nd and a 4th for Watt?
Again, same answer. I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
How many people are driving off the road right now saying yes?
Sure. No, I understand. I get the thought, especially on Watt. I mean, I understand the rationale behind that, especially if the team's assuming his whole contract there. But I just think Pittsburgh wants to be really rich at outside linebacker and really deep there and have a unique opportunity. And I go back to what Omar Khan had said way back when in February 24th, and I finally found the article. I had some trouble looking it up. He says, quote, Omar Khan did, "We're in good cap shape, so we have the flexibility to maybe do some things that might not be normal in people's eyes, but we have that flexibility. We've had flexibility that maybe you can go heavy in a specific position." And those words certainly coming true by paying Nick Herbig yesterday.
He was talking to me, wasn't he, about we're gonna spend a lot of cash in year 3 of this of the final period of the CBA. He was talking right at me. I felt it. Now
it's called subtext.
Now looking back in the rearview mirror here, I don't think personally. If we're talking about a 2nd round pick being the highest, draft capital in a trade, I wouldn't personally do it. Overall, I think you ride with the 3 and you just figure out a way and of trying to get these guys, enough snaps and hope that all three of these guys stay, and then hope that none of them fall off the cliff and severely diminish potential any trade value moving forward here. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take in lieu of a second round draft pick.
And just to kind of give my quick thoughts on the Herbig deal in general, I think it's just a situation where they draft, develop, retain. They found a really great gem in the fourth round. He's a really talented player, and you want to keep those guys around because Pittsburgh they've not found enough of those guys in the last 5-7 years, and they've not retained enough of those guys. And so that's the overall mindset of there's really good players. We're not going to let those guys walk and go play against us. So let's keep these guys that we find and develop, and we'll make everything else work. And when you have a quarterback situation where you're not paying quarterback big money in 2027 and beyond, in all likelihood, certainly you have that flexibility to make these kinds of moves.
How much? Look, Jack Sawyer, I thought had a pretty decent rookie season, and I think Herbig had said something along the lines that he's leaned up a little bit, and it'd be interesting to see year two for him overall. But what kind of confidence do you have in Jack Sawyer right now at this point, based on the limited amount of playing time that he saw last year?
My stance on Jack Sawyer is really what it was before the draft. He could be a really good run defender and a average pass rusher, and my stance is basically the same.
Right, I would agree.
Number 3 rotational guy, not a starter.
Right, right. Okay, so at least there is plausibility to the notion that Highsmith or Watt could be traded, but plausibility versus probability, I guess.
Yeah, that's a fair way to frame it. I still think what'll happen after 2026, if Watt struggles, and this is all down the road. I'm not saying this is going to happen or should happen or will happen, but do you even cut TJ Watt? I'm just pulling up over the cap. A post June 1st cut next year is, I think, $0 in cap savings, but there's no negative to it. You have a bunch of dead money in there, but that's, I guess, a scenario if Watt does struggle in 2026.
Yeah, the thing with let's see, Watt is under contract through 2028. So you would, if you did something with him, let's see, there's no roster bonus for Watt in 2027, so you don't have to make a decision by March or anything like that. You would have, if you cut or traded Watt next offseason and before June the 1st, you would take a $20 million cap hit on him as far as dead money goes, and the cash saved would be $32 million. And then if you cut or traded Watt after June 1st, you would have $10 million in dead money for 2027 and another $10 million on the books for 2028. The conversation just becomes, assuming Watt plays with the Steelers in 2026, is he worth $32 million in cash, the same amount that he's earning this year in cash? Is he worth it to retain in 2027? That's and that should be a fairly simple black and white yes or no answer, right?
I
After
don't
this
know
season.
if it's going to be black and white, but it'll be a conversation that we'll have unless he has, and obviously if he has a fantastic year, then that'll become black and white. If it's anything else, then maybe it'll be a conversation.
All right, one final piece of this discussion here. If they were to trade either Alex Highsmith or Watt, when would be the most likeliest time for that to happen?
That's a good question. I don't know the timetable of when that would happen. Nothing's really, I mean, it could happen at any time. And we saw the June 30th trade last year with Ramsey and Minka and Jonnu Smith. Probably before training camp, I guess you would think, just because, so everyone kind of knows where the roster is at before training camp. But I don't really have a timeline of when it would most likely happen.
Yeah, you don't. Well, you don't have to get in a hurry of it unless you get the right offer right now. So, it's not like the biggest thing is you're just worried about health of the guys, but you wouldn't expect at this point during the preseason, you're not going to probably see a lot of Watt, Highsmith, or Herbig during the preseason, right?
Sure. Yeah, probably not. I mean, a little bit of playing time for the new system and scheme for maybe couple of those guys, Herbig or Highsmith, but yeah, not a lot.
And if you're a team that's looking to acquire one of those guys, you'd probably want them in your system sooner rather than later, right? So you would think on the heels of this Herbig deal, by the time you would think that if one of those guys were to be traded, I mean, it could obviously be at any time, and you could roll right on up to week 1 of the season. But I think probability wise, you would think it would happen before training camp, right?
Yeah, but again, haven't spent much time thinking about that, and the NFL deals can materialize pretty quickly. So we'll see. I imagine Pittsburgh will get some calls though, and we'll see how they proceed.
All right. To cap off the conversation, the terrible podcast at gmail.com. Second round pick, and let's just say you only got a second round pick for either Highsmith or Watt. Are you trading either one of those guys right now for a second round draft pick? And specifically, which one would you entertain more so than maybe the others? So maybe we'll get some interesting replies as far as that goes. So I know people probably want us to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, especially on the heels of the Herbig contract. So consider that aspect of it done, and hopefully we've looked at it from several different angles here to give people enough to chew on to think about.
Dave, the question is, what player gets paid next? And we wonder if it'll be cornerback Joey Porter Jr. And you made the joke, and I wrote it in my article this morning, the world's shortest hold-in was Nick Herbig yesterday with his one-day hold-in. Joey Porter Jr. was holding in as well at practice, attending, but not really participating, according to reports. And Porter speaking to reporters after practice saying, I want to be here, and just hoping that the deal gets done. And so we're on Porter watch for the next big contract.
Look, it's a perfect time to interject in here. I thought Herbig and Porter both represented himself really good in the media sessions yesterday. Even though they were cliche, I thought they were well rehearsed, cliche type answers. Uh, Did they say anything that we wouldn't expect them to say? No, but I thought both of those guys handled the several different lines of questioning about the kind of hold-ins perfectly there. So I just want to get that out of the way. I don't think either one of the press conferences of Joey Porter Jr. or Nick Herbig could have gone any better than they did, specifically with it, the focus being on quote unquote hold-ins, if you will. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first. When it comes to who's next, yeah, I would think at this point, man, you got Herbig done, and you got him done early. I would have predicted that getting a deal with Herbig done would have been tougher than a Porter deal. I thought the Porter deal was potential Porter deal is more black and white and less kind of potential maybe variance in there than Porter. And at this point now, on the heels of, you've got a line in the sand, at least, and look, they play two different positions, yada yada. One's more has obviously played a lot more than the other one is, but the fact that you're drawing the line in the sand at a $25 million average yearly value, that's not even the conversation with Porter starts at least $1 million over that. So I at this point,
do you think those are intertwined, where Herbig steal impacts Porter's ask?
if I'm Porter's agent, it does.
I think it's just the cornerback market is the cornerback market.
Sure.
And I think that's what'll drive. I mean, Porter could get more, but I think it's just about the cornerback market than what Herbig got.
Well, look, even if the deal for Herbig didn't not get done, I think that maybe even the starting point with Porter would have been $25 million.
Okay, yeah, that's reasonable.
Personally, so the fact that Herbig is now on the books now at that, I think that the bidding starts at $26 million if I'm his agent. And if you look at the top four, and I'll have to look at exactly what happened with the Patrick Surtain contract to see what technically his new money value is, but he entered yesterday at least with a $24 million average yearly value. I think it's gone up a little bit from there. And if you look at the top 4 highest paid cornerbacks now, at least on the books, waiting to see what exactly happened with Patrick Surtain, is $31 million for McDuffie. Ahmad Garner is at 30.1. Derek Stingley Jr. is at 30 million, and then J.C. Horn's next at 25 million. So I think now on the heels of, and once again, I'm not comparing the Herbig and Porter are 2 different positions, but if I'm looking at this from an agent standpoint, organizationally, you just paid essentially a part-time player 25 million, and Porter's a full-time player, and especially in the cornerback market here, the bidding doesn't the negotiations start at 26 million. So I think realistically, you're looking at, do I expect him to crack Derek Stingley Jr. at 30 million? You can make some argument for that. I think that's a bit rich overall there. So I'm looking at the range now with Porter, if we're being realistic, of 26 to 29 million. If you want me to refine it down even more, I would go as far as say that Porter's market is 27 to 29 million.
Okay, yeah, there's a gap there between Stingley and Horn, 30 million for Stingley, 25 million for Horn, that I'm sure Porter would like to slide himself into. It's just, the edge market. I mean, Herbig is still the 16th highest paid edge rusher, because that market has exploded so much over the last 24 months, and quarterback's just not quite as hot right now. I mean, if Porter got even 23 million, he'd be a top 10 paid corner higher from an average yearly value standpoint. Of course, the dollars still are the dollars, and that's what an agent's gonna focus on. So, would he get more than Surtain? I mean, obviously he could, and I think you make a reasonable case for it. I guess my thought is somewhere in that 23 to 27 range, but that's probably a little too broad.
Do you think that his side would settle for less than 25 million or less?
I think it's possible, but I understand that they probably want to try to get that 4th spot where that big gap exists between Horn and Stingley.
Now, I guess technically Joey Porter Jr. now that Herbig's taken care of, and not that Herbig might have been in the discussion for the tag next offseason anyway, but it looks like now the 2027 projected franchise tag for cornerback is 23.692 million. Now that's likely to go up a little bit here at the rest of the offseason. So let's say that number's at 25 million potential tag for Joey Porter Jr., who is currently on the books thanks to the proven performance escalator this year at the same number that Herbig was previously scheduled to earn, 3.924 million. So almost 4 million there. And then let's say a potential tag amount of 24 million. If you add those two together, you get 28 million. To me, that feels like the ballpark figure for an APY for Joey Porter Jr. based on the market, the recent deals. Herbig just getting his deal. If I was to bet on it right now, I would go 28 million neighborhood.
All right, yeah, that's fair. You're selling me on that, the Porter, especially just the principle of Herbig as a rotational guy, 25 million, Porter full-time guy, wanting to get more than that. So, yeah, I can see that. Again, I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what that Porter deal would be. I'm just confident it's going to get done, and probably not going to have to wait too long on a deal getting done with how swiftly Omar Khan has been making some of these moves. So all that seems reasonable.
The only real sticking point, I think, to get this thing maybe signed, sealed, and delivered is guaranteed money. Are we talking about any fully guaranteed money in 2027 as part of the first official new year of the contract for Joey Porter Jr.? If he's top three. I mean, you've got some precedent out there, I think, with DK Metcalf, right?
I was going to mention that. Yeah, if he gets to that 27, 28 figure, that puts him probably in guaranteed money, a la Metcalf. What was Metcalf, like the third highest paid receiver when
At
they
the
gave him that
time,
contract last year? Yeah.
it was either the second or I think it was the third, wasn't it? And he did get some fully guaranteed money in the second year. So you can imagine that being used against the Steelers if Porter ends up, say, the third highest paid corner. We could be potentially looking at Joey Porter Jr. having fully guaranteed money, which would make sense based on some of these other cornerback deals out here. I think that might be the biggest obstacle of this whole deal, because I think it's to me it feels pretty cut and dry around a $28 million APY with him, and then the only discussion is how much of that fully guaranteed money rolls into the first new year of the deal of 2027, and I think Porter's side would have a strong argument based on what happened with DK Metcalf, who wasn't wasn't drafted and developed by the team. Joey Porter Jr. certainly would have grounds to stand on to get some guaranteed money in 2027. Now, once again, we don't know the specifics of the Herbig deal yet. I wonder if that might surface today or at least by Friday. We'll talk about it if it is. And I know there's that $42 million fully guaranteed number rolling around out there. I will be absolutely shocked if 42 million is fully guaranteed. I envision really no fully guaranteed money for Herbig in the second year. It will be really worth a long conversation if indeed any of Herbig's 2027 money is fully guaranteed. It will be quite a shift in organizational. Pandora's box will be open at that point, fully open, and more so than just a top three positionally paid player at that point. So, to put a cap on this, Joey Porter Jr. is going to get done, correct?
Yes.
And it's more than likely sooner rather than later.
That's my belief, but you never know exactly how negotiations go and how dug in one side could be. So I don't want to guarantee that. But again, we've seen Omar Khan move pretty quickly, whether that was Watt last year, Herbig, Boswell, Minka a couple of years ago. I mean, he wants to try to get these things done sooner than later. So I think before camp is a reasonable expectation.
All right, you taking over or under 28 million for Joey?
Under.
I guess we should set a more. I think he comes right in at 28 million. I could foresee this being what's 56 million times 2? That's 112 million, right?
Yes.
I think that's the new money, $112 million, and then the total of the deal would be 115,924,000.
That's a 4-year extension, correct?
That's a 4-year extension. Yeah.
Yeah. I could see it. So yeah, fair points by you.
All right. And then the question then becomes, moving on, because Porter's going to get done at some point. Then does Darnell or Keanu Benton get done? So
and Darnell, those are smaller contracts, especially for Washington.
All right. We went down a couple of rabbit holes here. What's left?
I think it probably sums it up well. Very busy day for the Steelers and NFL at large. So they're holding their second mandatory minicamp practice today, and we'll hear more from players, and I think Mike McCarthy maybe as well, and go from there.
All right. What did Mike McCarthy have to say that perked up your ears yesterday? Anything?
The special teams coach was the notable aspect of it. Mentioned they went through a 2-minute drill where it was Rudolph and Howard and Aller getting reps and getting that time. Rodgers was not participating in that, just to kind of be able to distribute reps, which isn't unusual. Pittsburgh had done similar under Tomlin in training camp. They would rotate some of those 2-minute drill stuff around, but just trying to put an exclamation point on the work.
All right. The other talking point he ended it with was the talk about the officials being in town for mandatory minicamp, and making sure, and telling his players to make sure to use them as a resource and all. And I would imagine, I mean, that it's not anything earth shattering having referees at a mandatory minicamp, but it's obviously something that Mike McCarthy values, and I would expect to hear a lot about having officials there. I think he said as much the rest of I think today, and obviously in training camp we're going to see officials there.
Yeah, stuff that happened under Mike Tomlin, and then McCarthy just mentioning, when with Herbig before the contract was signed, that he understood Herbig kind of sitting out, and they apparently had lunch together during the owners' meetings in March, which Herbig talked about that he really appreciated McCarthy sitting down with him, breaking bread. So, it's a healthy situation. I think McCarthy just speaking about the Herbig extension right now to reporters. I don't have the exact quote, but McCarthy obviously happy that Herbig is here for the long haul.
Absolutely, and especially now that he's under contract, and you can have this final day with him doing what he needs to do in mandatory minicamp, and obviously now there will be no hold in for the start of training camp with Nick Herbig there. Deshaun Elliott was another highlighted player by Steelers.com there. The general takeaway there is this guy's healthy and ready to go, right?
Yeah, that was really my impression. He's fully recovered from last year's terrible knee injury and on the grass, which is great. And so good to get him up and running for this new coaching staff.
All right, I think we hit on everything right that we wanted to talk about.
Yep, I think that's everything. We'll come back Friday, wrap up minicamp, and maybe talk about some other odds and ends. And hopefully, we'll be recording our Steelers Depot Jeopardy episode. I think we're going to do that Thursday. I think it's probably going to drop maybe Monday. We'll drop the episode, not 100% sure. So hopefully, you're studying, Dave.
All right, I'll try to. Let's get some emails out of the way here. David Haig writes in. TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Good morning from Pittsburgh, Kansas. The other Pittsburgh, but with no H. I haven't listened to the emergency episode yet, but I wanted to check what you guys thought about the possibility of Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt traded this offseason now that they've signed Nick Herbig to a long-term deal. What would you say to percent chances for either of them being traded? I suspect TJ would possibly get a second with a late round pick swap or a third. If Alex Highsmith were to be traded, what do you think those trade terms might be? David, we nipped that one in the bud. Hopefully you enjoyed, by the time you get to us reading your question, hopefully you enjoyed the long conversation that Alex and I had on that. So not going to go any further there. Paul Lutz writes in, now that Nick Herbig is extended, do you think McCarthy and company will use him more like Micah Parsons? He says, Watt is clear that he likes his side, but Herbig is very versatile. I can see his snaps increase without cutting into Watt or Highsmith. They will find more ways to use him by kicking him inside and running more stunts or twists, especially with Wilson's struggles in base. What say you? Keep up the great work. Paul, that's another area that kind of we've hit on here, and I think that is assuming that Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig are all part of this 2026 team. That's the most interesting part of the conversation moving into the season is how often can they get those guys, all three of them on the field, and what will it look like down distance? Is there a possibility we could see, I don't even know what to put on a potential snap count of that.
I wouldn't worry about snap count, but what do the packages look like?
Right.
You're going to have your pass rush package with all three like last year, I imagine, although maybe they'll do a little bit different things with the new coaching staff. Could you go back to the run defense look where you had somebody playing off ball over the A gap like you had in Highsmith's rookie season? What else can you add to it? That's what I'm looking for. Let's focus less on the number of snaps and just what the personnel might look like.
All right, agreed. All right, Arthur Elliott, David Alex, do you think Herbig's deal, specifically his $41 million in guaranteed money, signals a new shift in philosophy for Steelers contracts as he's not at the top of his position and he got more than 1 year guaranteed? How does this affect Highsmith as his APY is significantly less than Herbig and he's still considered the starter? Question mark. Arthur, I will say this. Let's wait to see what the particulars about the Herbig contract are. I realize that it's being framed as $42 million guaranteed, but that's not out of the ordinary with the agent side of things of how they want the major media guys like Schefter and Rappaport and all those guys to frame these things. Let's wait until we see what is fully guaranteed of that 42 million or 41 million, I forget what the number is, but how much of it is fully guaranteed versus how much of that is injury guaranteed, because there is a difference when it comes to those. So we will address that if once we know the particulars of this thing, and I'm willing to bet that it's not the fully guaranteed 41, 42 million, that around half of that is potentially injury guaranteed. Is that a fair enough answer there, Alex?
Yeah, that's a good word of caution to the initial reporting of these deals. Let's get the full details on it, and then we can really evaluate how this deal changes things, if at all.
All right, let's see what else we have in here at this point. Where I lost my spot here from Arthur. Mario Brunell, Herbig's new role. He says, howdy, gents. Herbig's extension warrants a marked increase in playing time. However, we already have 2 starting outside linebackers, but we do have question marks at inside linebacker. Could this new commitment point to the team using Herbig in a hybrid inside outside linebacker role a la Micah Parsons in his early career? He says, I feel like money would justify such a move. So what do you think about a more hybrid role for Herbig?
Yeah, I think the door's open. I don't know if I want to call it straight up hybrid, but just some sort of packages or wrinkles. I mean, Herbig's played a little bit of off ball work in some of those pass rush groupings last year. So, I think Pittsburgh can and should get creative and inventive. Now they do seem to be high on Peyton Wilson. So, how does Wilson develop and how does he play and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think Pittsburgh should really keep a very open mind and be very creative and not put any limits on how they plan to use all 3 of those guys.
All right, good answer. Well, let's take one more. James Sussinelli writes in, history repeating. Did Herbig take Joey's deal? All right. If Joey Porter Jr. doesn't sign a new contract, I wonder if he was offered the same contract, $100 million over 4 new years, $42 million guaranteed, and turned it down. Like when Mike Wallace passed on the contract and it was offered to Antonio Brown. He said, just a crazy tinfoil hat theory. I hope I'm wrong because I want Joey to be with the Steelers a long time. He says he's happy for Herbig. That's from James. James, I appreciate a good tinfoil hat theory as much as the next guy here. I don't think we're in that realm there where they said, Joey, here's the deal. Do you want it or not? And Joey's side said no, and they said, all right, Nick, here is Joey Porter Jr.'s deal. I just don't think that was the train of thought here. I still think Joey Porter Jr. gets done. Alex and I just had a conversation of what we expect that deal looks like. I suppose if the Joey Porter Jr. deal doesn't get done for any reason, a lot of people might circle back to this whole Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown thing, but I don't think this is a situation here.
Yeah, I don't believe it's one or the other. Again, because you're not paying that quarterback all that big money. Back then, I forget exactly where Ben was at on his contract, but I assume he was on his non-rookie contract then, and so it's when you're not paying that quarterback big money, it really opens up the rest of the roster. Now, usually the case is you're paying a franchise rookie quarterback before he's eligible, like a Drake May or something like that, and you kind of take advantage of that window. Pittsburgh's not really in that position, obviously, but they don't have all that long-term money tied up in the quarterback position, which creates that flexibility to pay other guys on the roster.
All right. It seems like most of the questions we are having in here are obviously about how either how Herbig how these three outside linebackers get used now, assuming all three are with the team. And the other part of the question is about Herbig or Watt potentially getting traded. So we've had a long conversation covering all those topics today. If you got any more questions kind of moving forward that discussion, interested to get the feedback from people on, let's just say, a second round pick for either Watt or Highsmith. Would you trade either one of them? And if so, who? And obviously open to more conversation about how they go about potentially using these three guys, assuming all three of them are on the 53-man roster this year in 2026. So with that, it's a good jumping off point at about an hour and a half into this, Alex. A good show today, and we will be back on Friday wrapping up mandatory minicamp. And looking ahead to, I guess, next week's OTA session on top of it there. So in the meantime, hopefully we'll have some Herbig details to discuss as well. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex underscore Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. We crammed a lot in there, Alex, in 90 minutes today. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.